Jyotirgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste everyone and welcome to the 12th session of Atmabodha. I hope I am clearly audible to everyone. Today we have some very important ideas to discuss. In the very next verse, the 41st verse which we are going to discuss, you have the theory of perception according to Vedanta. How is it understood in Vedanta? How exactly do we know an object? And the characteristic feature in Vedanta is a kind of tripartite distinction is made between the subject, the method of knowing, and the object. Just to understand the process of perception acutely, this triad is formulated. There is a subject, a knower, using a method of knowledge in order to arrive at the knowledge of the object. So this technically it is called Jnata, the knower, Jnanam or knowledge, the process, and Jneyam, that is the object of knowledge. It is also called Pramata because actually speaking, if you zero in on the experience, it is the knower is the witnessing awareness in the mind. So that is called the Pramata, and through Praman, through the process of knowledge, he knows the Prameyam, the object of knowledge. So all these words are used. Basically, what are they trying to tell us? How do I know now? Suppose there is this pen in front of me. How do I know this pen? This is how it is understood in Vedanta, that initially for me to know an object, my mind must be able to produce a vritti of that object. Vritti is a modification, a whirl as it were. So this is produced in the mind due to this object, and that modification of the mind, that vritti, is illuminated by consciousness standing behind the mind. And that is how I know this object. So you see, a large part of perception is my contribution. Without mind, you cannot know an object, even if it is in front of you. Isn't this pretty obvious? If we are not mindful of something, you may be looking, but you are not seeing it. So mind is required, and it must be a conscious mind. There must be consciousness, because that is what illumines the vritti, the modification of the mind to generate knowledge of the object. So this distinction between the knower, the process of knowledge, and the known is maintained right up to self-realization, till Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Because there, when we ask for self-knowledge, the object is the self. Now, is there a separate knower which is going to know the self as an object? No, isn't it? The knower in his real nature is the self. So then how does this work? That is why till Savikalpa Samadhi, which means that Samadhi which pertains to objects, even if it is, the object is your Ishtam, even if the object is the personal form of God, this distinction, this tripartite distinction holds. But when it comes to the knowledge of the Atman and Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Brahma Vidya, then this tripartite distinction falls. It vanishes, because the object is nothing but the core reality about the subject. So then how is there a modification of mind to be created to know myself? Absolutely not. So this very process is reversed. You are going to focus your entire mental energy on gaining complete self-awareness. That is why I told you in the last class, in the act of supreme meditation, the highest point of meditation, you don't become aware of awareness. You just become completely aware. You reach a point where the subject who was seeking the self becomes the self. So it is knowing by being. This thing can only be captured in meditation. In the normal way of knowing, we are used to this triad of knowledge. That's why we don't doubt it. But this does not apply exactly to self-realization. That is why self-knowledge is a special kind of knowledge. It is a special way of knowing. In fact, many masters have not even called it knowledge, although Vedanta calls it knowledge. They have used the word being and becoming. They have used the word emptying the mind completely to reach its source. So all this, this is the vocabulary that has been used to understand the real nature of the subject and the usual way in which we know an object. That entire distinction, tripartite distinction, triad of knowledge collapses when it comes to self-knowledge. So here, let us go into this verse, the 41st verse, and then we will dive into this concept further. Jnatru jnana jneya bhedaha pare natmani vidyate chidanandaika rupatvat deepyate swayameva tat. The Supreme Self, on account of its being of the nature of exceeding bliss, does not admit of the distinction of the knower, knowledge, and the object of knowledge. It alone shines. See, this is exactly what I was pointing towards. It alone shines. You don't know it as an object. All you have to work upon is emptying the mind of objects, of unnecessary vrittis, and cultivating awareness, enhancing awareness. Perception has to do with awareness, definitely, but objective perception has to do with awareness invested in the mind. But perceiving the subject has only to do with generating pure awareness in itself. So there are definite techniques to do this. If you read the lives of the masters, whether you read the life of Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Raman Maharshi, you will see they arrived at this through just like that. Sometimes they did not even use a kind of graded method, a methodology, a technique to come to this, but they arrived at pure awareness just like that because of the ripeness of their minds. So to generate that ripeness, you can use a technique, but the thing in itself will happen just by itself when the mind is ripe. Raman Maharshi used to say, there is no mistaking consciousness when it is pure. This is a most striking statement. Only when consciousness is impure, invested in the thought process, it is difficult to track it. It is difficult to understand it. When it is pure, you will get it as it is. Nothing, no technique is required. That's why many masters don't even speak of techniques. Because the self ever is. What technique can you use to go to this source of your very experience? So this is the normal process which is adopted by yogis and jnanis. They try to empty mind and reach the very source of the mind. Because as long as vrittis are active, you are only going to get vritti jnan. You are only going to get objective knowledge, not the knowledge of the subject. So the mind is put down, stalled, stopped, so that you can see what is behind it. The investiture of awareness in the mental processes stopped. This is what the Yoga Sutras, the first 4 Yoga Sutras are telling you. Let me give you a beautiful illustration here in the life of Swami Brahmananda. So you can best understand these things through the lives of illumined people who have attained enlightenment. So in Swami Brahmananda's life, there is this very beautiful incident. I hope, I think you know who is Swami Brahmananda. He was the spiritual son of Sri Ramakrishna, a very close apostle of Sri Ramakrishna, whom Sri Ramakrishna himself looked upon as a son. And he was he was veritably a dynamo of spirituality. And he radiated spirituality wherever he went and as he was. And all of his words are very profound. If you read that small book, Eternal Companion, you will see they just hit you. They are like that, his words, because they come from an illumined mind. Now he gives this wonderful process. Just observe this. He was called Raja Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda. So one day he was sitting in Belur Math in a room which was close to Swamiji's room. And then he was in a sort of meditative mood. It was very hot on that day. Just now Delhi also is very hot. So it was so hot that there was somebody sitting close to him and fanning him. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then a disciple of Swami Brahmananda entered his room. Then suddenly Swami Brahmananda said, "Come on, let's meditate on the Himalayas so that it cools us down." Then he let out a great secret. He said, "You know what? This mind is full of so many things, so many sanskars, so many vrittis, full of all sorts of stuff. But if you empty it, if you empty the mind, you will find awareness there. This awareness, dat kore jole utbe. It will just shine forth. Yogically, if you empty mind, you will arrive at the state of pure awareness. The stronger this awareness, which means the clearer your mind, the more you will be able to grasp. Perception will be perfect, the stronger this awareness." Then he gives an example here. He says, like for example, a pot, it has water. It also has space, but you can't see the space. When you pour out water, you can see there is space there. When there is water, you can't see the space. So also awareness is ever there. It is the foundation of the thought process. That is why I keep saying awareness is invested in the thought process, so you can't find it there. So the only thing you can do is you empty the mind of thoughts. If you do that, at some point when it is complete, this process, you will find yourself to be just fully aware without the thought process. Then Swami Brahmananda says, this is a very important state, because in this state of mind where there are no sanskars anymore but full awareness, whatever you place in this state of mind, that will become a living reality for you. If you place the Himalayas, as an object, you will feel the coolness of the Himalayas. You will get refreshed. You will actually feel you are in the midst of the great mountains. You will get refreshed by the experience. Any sattvic object you place there, you place your Ishtam, it will get enlivened. It will become a living reality for you, because your consciousness has become absolutely clear of everything and shines by itself. Whatever it falls upon, it will illuminate. So this is how you can actually experience anything as an enlivened something in your awareness. It has become conscious and enlivened by your light. And this is not just light, this is the light of your awareness. So you make the thing living there. And then, after giving this analogy, he said, do you remember the parable of Sri Ramakrishna about that tub of dye? I think many of you will be knowing that, those of you who read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna used to give this story, that there was a man sitting in a marketplace with a tub of dye, which was very miraculous. Because, whoever came to him to dye his cloth, he would dip that cloth in the same tub and remove the color which the person wanted. He would dye the cloth in the color which the person wanted. So somebody came and told him, "Please dye my cloth blue." And he dipped it into the tub and blue cloth came out. And he gave that cloth to the person. Then somebody came to him and said, "Please dye my cloth in red." And he dipped it into the same tub and gave him the red piece of cloth. Somebody said, "I want yellow piece of cloth." And he dipped it into the same tub and he removed a yellow cloth and gave it to him. Then Swami Brahmananda says, see, this mind, which is completely aware and bereft of a thought process, bereft of even sanskars, which are nothing but solidified thought, bereft of all of this, that pure mind filled with awareness, this is that miraculous tub. Anything you dip into it, you will realize it. Anything you want, you can get out of it. Then he said, Swami Brahmananda continues, he says, I have given you a very secret, important teaching today. Meditate on this and you will know that this is the fact about the human mind. See, this is a very profound teaching. He also added a method here by saying, you must meditate with devotion. You see, vitality is to be maintained. That is why devotion. Vital energy has to remain at its peak. But no conditioned thought process. And you will be able to generate the state of complete awareness. This very mind, the foundation of this mind lies in awareness. That is why Pratibodha Viditam Matam, any thought can take you there actually, ideally speaking. But we use the process of emptying mind of thought because our general thought process is so very erratic, discursive, and it can take the mind outward. So distance yourself from the thought process, empty mind, generate the state of pure awareness. Then whatever you place there will just give you complete knowledge of that thing. It just becomes luminous there. It is a living reality for you. This is the miracle tub of Sri Ramakrishna's story. Whatever you dip into that tub and whatever you wish for, you will get out of that tub. So you see, this is a very profound matter. We are talking about it like this. It is to be done, to be known, as I always say. Even one glimpse of the thoughtless state where you are fully aware, fully conscious but without thoughts will change your life forever. Just one bout of this meditation will change your mind, your life completely. There's a paradigm shift. Changing life means changing thought, changing emotion, changing your will, your motivations. Everything will change naturally. Your very philosophy of life will change. So the method has been clearly put forth by the masters. And ours is only to follow in their footsteps. So what is being said here in Atmabodha is very profound matter. That the self, knowledge of the self, does not admit of the three distinctions of knower, a process of knowledge, and known. It is just knowing by generating the right state of mind, bereft of thought. So you can call it knowledge if you want. You can call it pure being if you want. You can call it being and becoming, as Swamiji said, if you want. Call it whatever you want, but generate the state within you. That's the essential thing. The price of the pudding is in the eating. It has to be done, and the feel of it can only be got when we touch that state. So this is what is being described in verse number 41, to my understanding. And then let's go to verse number 42. Eva matma ranau dhyana mathane satatam krite uditava gatirjvala sarvajnana indhanam dahet. By constant meditation, comparable to the rubbing of firewood, is kindled the flame of knowledge, which completely burns up the fuel of ignorance. So you see, the power of meditation will burn up ignorance. The power of meditation brings clarity in your perceptive process. What was ever there is recognized as it is. Here, Nikhilanandaji Maharaj has given beautiful commentary. In ancient India, the sacrificial fire was kindled by rubbing two pieces of wood, one placed upon the other. The mind is compared to the lower piece and Om to the upper piece. Meditation is their friction. That is to say, meditation is intense thinking upon Atman as Brahman with the help of the repetition of the word symbol Om. So here, it is not exactly thinking about the reality, the equation that Atman is equal to Brahman. It is just paying attention to what you have discovered as the Atman, and it will lead you to the knowledge of Brahman. In the path of meditation, attention is everything. If you pay enough attention to Om, that which is indicated by Om will be revealed to you. If you pay enough attention to the mind, that which is the basis of the mind will be revealed to you. It is not a process of knowing, please see. It is not a process of thinking. It is just knowing by the amount of attention you have paid to the subject. So this is to be known only by practice. If you actually analyze thought, you will see thought also has some ingredients. There is an idea portion, there's an emotion maybe attached to it, and of course vital energy invested in it, which makes thought so real to us. But there is no such thing in the process of knowing Atman, because it does not admit of anything else. It is pure knowing, you can say. It is seeing the thing as it is, pure consciousness, and you can know it only when you become it. The mind has reached a state of clarification where that alone is the truth, whichever shines forth. So this is being described, and you see the first line is so beautiful. By constant meditation is kindled the flame of knowledge. This is the whole thing. How should I know? By constantly applying my mind in meditation. You cannot know it in any other way. You cannot get it through books. You cannot get it through lectures. By turning the mind inward and applying it to this, by generating a power of undivided attention on this, it can be known. So this is being described in this verse. Let's go to the next one. They are all connected. Arunena iva bodhena purvam san tamase hrite tata avir bhaved atma swayameva amshumaniva. As the sun appears after the destruction of darkness by dawn, so Atman appears after the destruction of ignorance by knowledge. See, the Atman is known by itself if ignorance is gone. All our work is only to remove ignorance. You don't bring in the self. The self is ever there. You did not see it so long. So the entire effort is to remove the tamas, the darkness over the mind, which is of the nature of ignorance. And like for example, as he says, as the sun appears after the destruction of darkness by dawn. So you don't make any special effort to bring in the sun. Just the darkness has to go, that's all. The sun is ever there. Now this knowledge, along with meditation, there must be a solid support of reasoning, because Vedanta is a philosophy which never contradicts reason, which does not demand your faith. If you just apply your analytical intellect, you will naturally develop faith in it, because it is perfectly rational. It is scientific actually, and it satisfies your reason. Let me just give you a few pointers here to help you understand how Vedanta penetrates into this. I always suggested the path of meditation and inquiry. So 1 or 2 points on inquiry we can include here. In a very right mind, as I told you, even a technique like meditation is not required. It can just go into the knowledge of the self. But for any normal, ordinary mind, it is required to combine these techniques. In the path of inquiry, you see this simple point which I can give you here. Now tell me, is there a common element in saying I, my sense of I, my body, my mind, body, mind, I? There is nothing in common between these three. Think and see. I always say my body, my mind. It belongs to the I. The two of them belong to I. But I am not the body. There is no common element between the two. Both of these, body and mind, are objects of my perception always. I can study them perfectly. That's what medical science is about. The psychological sciences are about. So there is no common factor between these three. We mix up the three because of ignorance. I am the body and mind. But if you analyze and see, there is no truth in this matter. Do you ever feel your age? Tell me. Even when the joints are creaking and painful and no, you see it as my body is aching. The pain belongs to my body. You actually never feel your age until you think about your age. Think and see. That's why no matter whether we are 40, 50, 60, 70, whatever, we always, at heart we are young. Because that's what you are. Your awareness, which is ever young, ever free. But if you think, you feel your age. Oh no, I was born in this year, so I am 70 years old. You never feel your age in the first person. Check and see, please. And it is only when you remember the body. See, when you stop thought, all these things become very clear. That it is indeed true that I never feel my age until I remember my age. You are ever awareness itself. How will you feel your identification with the body and mind immediately? You don't feel it at all. So you have to think about your age to feel it. You have to think about the pains in your body to feel them. And that also they are felt as my body, my pain. Not me the pain, me the body. That is not how they are felt. Like this, there are a number of pointers actually, which I have given in one of the talks. See, let me tell you one more thing. Your self-awareness is an effortless process, isn't it? Do you make any effort to become self-aware? But you make an effort to think. You make an effort to feel. You make an effort to do. You don't apply an effort to become aware. You just become aware. Self-awareness is effortless. It is your nature. In that awareness, you are thinking, feeling, willing, doing. Check and see if this is true or not. So fundamentally, you are a self-aware being, an entity who has been given an equipment through which to function. This must be our perception of ourselves. From the first person perspective, this is exactly how it is. And the more we clear our mind, the more this will become obvious. So then what should be our relationship with the body and mind, with our own body and mind? What will be your relationship with some instrument you are using? Now you are using this laptop. Don't we maintain it well? We do whatever is required for that to function well. So also you will do whatever is required for the body-mind complex to function well. Take care of it. It is a temple of your soul. It houses your soul. So take care of it, look after it. But remember, you are never identified with it 100%. It belongs to you. It is not you. So this sense naturally drives us into wanting to know the self. Then who am I truly? If I'm dead sure, cocksure, I'm only the body and mind. This question also will not matter to me. Who am I? So that is why this is recommended, this vivek, this philosophical discrimination, distinction between the subject and the object. Between you, the self, and the body-mind complex. That is why it is recommended. So all these are important pointers given to us. One more thing. You are not conscious of the body unless you are made conscious of it. Is this true? Think and see. If you are made conscious of your body, just now you are all absorbed in Atmabodha. If somebody calls you or shakes you, then you will suddenly become aware of somebody and then of yourself sitting here. Otherwise, you are not aware of the body at all because of the application of your mind. So you are barely conscious of the body unless you are made conscious of it. This is your normal state. As human beings, we have been given a mechanism which can forget itself. But self-aware you are always. Nobody can take your awareness away from you. So that is what Vedanta is telling you. So that is fundamentally you. Don't make the mistake of only thinking yourself in terms of body and mind. In fact, it is an insult to identify just with the body. You're insulting yourself when you do just that much. Because this is an instrument given for us to function in this world. And give it that value. Keep it like that. But understand your real nature, who you truly are. In the Bhagavad Gita, how beautifully this is put. When Arjuna is weeping and completely not able to accept his killing his own kith and kin, then Lord Krishna introduces this knowledge. He says, understand who you truly are, then you will know who the others also truly are. Don't identify the man with the body. Don't identify the person with just his physical being. That is actually insulting a person. Because that's not what you are. The day we realize this as a society, we will create a really great society. Not a body-based society. A society of the highest values. So self-knowledge, it strengthens a man from within. It purifies him from within. So like this, I can go on giving you a number of clues and pointers, but I think it's better to proceed with the text. As the context comes, I will be giving you more and more of this. Let's go to the next verse, and we also have questions. So verse number 44. Atma tu satatam prapto api apraptavat avidyaya tan nashe praptavat bhati swakanthabharanam yatha. Though Atman is an ever-present reality, yet because of ignorance it is unrealized. On the destruction of ignorance, Atman is realized. It is like the case of the ornament on one's neck. So this can happen, that you are wearing an ornament, a necklace, say, of pearls, and you're searching for it. Because you forgot you wore it already. So, doesn't this happen? Sometimes people are searching for their spectacles and they are in their pocket. So many times we are doing things like this. It's right there. This is what he's trying to tell us. The Atman is ever there. And where are you searching for it? With what are you searching for it? Many people keep 2 pairs of spectacles or 3, 4 pairs. So if you lose one, you wear the other and search for it. So with what will you search the Atman? So that is why he's saying that the Atman ever is there. You aren't even wearing him. You are him. In fact, you can search for everything other than him. Him you will just realize. You will not find. You will find that which is lost. Atman is never lost. You did not pay attention to it. That's the only problem. You did not think about all this. That's why you are searching for it somewhere. You see, when we are searching for happiness in objects, this is what we are doing. Today we had that discussion on happiness. Ultimately, you realize that happiness is an exponential function of your awareness. The more self-aware you are, by yourself you will be happy. Self-starting inner happiness just unfolds. The more awareness is generated. But if awareness is not there, you are caught up in all sorts of thoughts, anxieties, worries. Where will happiness be? Then you will not find it in the mind. Then you search for it in outer objects. So it all depends on happiness, depends upon mind management. Mind management depends upon self-knowledge. And this is to be understood so that we will find happiness where it lies. And that is why he is saying that you are already wearing the necklace which you are searching. There is another nice story to this effect in the Upanishad. You must have heard of the story of the 10 men who tried to cross a river. Let me just briefly tell you the story here. It points to the same thing. There are these 10 people who crossed a river. So before they crossed the river, they counted themselves. And then after they crossed the river, they wanted to make sure nobody got drowned or carried away by the waters. So they again started counting. So this time they found only 9. One man started counting and he counted 9. He did not count himself. So then they got perplexed, and then another one said, well, let me count this time, wait. So he also counted 9. He did not count himself. So all of these 10 fools or whatever you say, they counted everybody other than themselves. So they were all very sorry. Oh, there are only 9 of us. And one is lost in the river and he must have been carried away by the waves and we don't know what happened. So they were very sorry and weeping when another traveler came there. And he said, what happened to you all? And they said that, we were 10 of us, now we are only 9. So one is lost and that's why we are crying. And he said, I see 10 of you. Come on, let me count. You keep quiet, let me count. And he said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now you can say this traveler is the guru. He will tell you, you keep quiet, let me count. He will show you that the 10th person is already there. You were counting wrongly because you didn't count yourself. So what did he do? Actually, he took one man's finger and said, you didn't count this person. So the meaning of this is, you must take your hand and first discover yourself. First know yourself. Then you will find everything is right. But without knowing yourself, without discovering yourself, what will you ever, does anything make much sense, you tell me? Discovering anything. Wherever we go, whatever we do, without knowing yourself, will anything make much sense? Without knowing yourself in depth. Even if you go to another solar system or into another galaxy, they are just physical objects for you. But you are the conscious being who is perceiving them. What knowledge have we of this consciousness first? So this is a very important science in itself, which can be dived into and discovered by oneself. It is to be known by oneself. Like in this story, each man, as he understood, oh, I did not count me. So now when I count myself, there are 10 of us. So there's no problem. Like that, you have to discover it yourself. And that is why Vedanta will always tell you this. Yoga and Vedanta philosophies which focus on the human being who is experiencing this world, on the experiencer. The entire philosophy is focused on discovering who is it who is experiencing. Even from an experience, if you drop the experiencer and the experienced, experience alone will remain. And fact of experience itself is Brahman. That is why Pratibodha Viditam. Experience is only possible due to first person awareness. So it will lead you to the knowledge of Brahman. That is why they say Anubhava Matra Brahma. Experience itself points to Brahman. So you see, all of these ideas which they are giving us are only meant to turn this entire mechanism inward so as to discover the ever-shining self in the human being. This is the glory of being human, that you can track the source of your being and you find that that very same consciousness is manifested in everything under different names, forms, under different guises, but the same thing manifested in so many ways. As was Sri Ramakrishna's vision after Samadhi, so also will be the vision of a knower of Brahman. That is why Neha Nanasti Kinchana, there are no divisions here, there is no other here. All these sentences you will find, all these statements you will find in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, that there is actually no manifestation. Existence is one. There are actually no many. What's the meaning of all this? They have touched the depth of their being, so this is how they perceive the world. And it is possible to do this and unite one's consciousness with everything that is manifested in this world. See, this is the ultimate expression of this great philosophy, that not just you get complete knowledge of the self, but you understand the very nature of existence, due to which there is an inclusiveness about you, all inclusiveness, because you find the other to be nothing but you in another form. Do you remember that very beautiful incident of Sri Ramakrishna asking Narendranath what he wanted to do in life? And Narendranath tells him, because you see, Swamiji is Dhyana Siddha. He is the greatest yogi. So he says, well, my ambition is to remain absorbed in Samadhi and to come out once in a while for a little food to maintain the body, but to remain absorbed in God, in Samadhi. That is my only aspiration. And then the Guru should have been very happy, isn't it, when the disciple says this. But what did Sri Ramakrishna say? What? I thought you would be like a huge banyan tree giving shade to thousands, but you said such a small thing. And then he said, you yourself sing that song, Tujhe se humne dil ko lagaya, jo kuch hai so tu hi hai. This is a very beautiful song in Hindi, which means I applied my mind to you, my Lord, and I found everything to be you. This is the fruit of applying your mind to Brahman, that you will see Brahman everywhere. Tujhe se humne dil ko lagaya, and that is why jo kuch hai so tu hi hai. Drishti jnanamayam kritva pashed brahmamayam jagat. So this all-inclusive experience of unitary consciousness is the culmination of self-knowledge. And this comes through definite techniques which they are giving us. This is the fulfillment of human life. This is the fulfillment of the human birth. And this is what we as developed human beings should aim at. The fulfillment of human life cannot be in physical conquest. It cannot even be in mental conquest. It cannot be in name, fame, whatever this realm of existence has to offer. Because no matter what you gain here, the mind will be asking, what next? The complete fulfillment comes in this experience of self-knowledge and its culminating point, this all-inclusive, singular, unitary awareness of Brahman. So that is why this is the subject matter of the Upanishads, and this is pointed out as the goal of human life. Now we'll go into the question answers, because that is also an important part of our discussion. Okay, the first question is, I believe Atmabodha primarily deals with Jnana Yoga. Sri Ramakrishna said that Bhakti Yoga is the correct path for this era. Swami Vivekananda said that not one yoga, but a harmony of all the 4 yogas has to be there. Swami Vivekananda also said that he was only teaching what his master Ramakrishna taught him. How do you deal with all this seeming contradiction? Okay, so let's take him step by step. I believe Atmabodha primarily deals with Jnana Yoga. So you are right. It primarily deals with the path of knowledge. Sri Ramakrishna said that Bhakti Yoga is the correct path for this era. This is also right. If you go to the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you will find the Master repeatedly saying that for the generality of the masses, for the common man, this is the path. For the simple reason, Bhakti is the path. For the simple reason, he has a strong sense of himself as being a jiva, separate from others, separate from God, and identified with a particular body-mind complex. This being his condition, he can only relate with a personal God. So Bhakti is the marg. Bhakti is the way for him. But to disciples like Swami Vivekananda, you remember, he gave a different prescription. Swamiji was the only person whom Sri Ramakrishna encouraged to pursue Advait Vedanta. And he in fact gave him that experience. You remember the incident? Once Naren and Hazra were laughing together that everything is God according to Advait Vedanta. See this cup, Ghati Ishwar, Bhati Ishwar. Everything is God. What kind of philosophy is this? And they were laughing. And Sri Ramakrishna came out of his room and said, what are you all talking about? And he just touched Naren, not Hazra. He touched Naren, and immediately the experience which Naren had was of unitary consciousness everywhere. Even when he went home, even on his way, everything he touched and felt, he only saw Brahman. It irradiated pure consciousness, as it were. And he was stunned, and then he understood the truth of what the Vedanta is saying. So you see, Sri Ramakrishna prescribed bhakti for the common people like us who are unable to enter into Advaita Marga, Jnana Marga straight away. So naturally, see, you must always begin from where you stand. This is a common principle in spiritual life. If you begin from where somebody stands, you are not going to reach where he will go. You must begin from where you stand. So understanding the nature of my mind at present, I will adopt my method. That is why Bhakti Marga has great appeal. Also because we are very emotional creatures, no matter how intellectual we think we are, many of us are very emotional by nature. So then Bhakti Marga will naturally work for us because it is directing your emotions towards the highest. Then Swami Vivekananda said that not one but a harmony of all the 4 yogas has to be there. So this is a very important point which I always insisted upon in these talks, for the simple reason you have all these faculties of intellect, will, emotion, the action, everything is there. When all of this is there, you can easily adopt all the 4 margas, all the 4 yogas I mean. Because you are like that. You are built like that. So adopt it. It won't be difficult. There is no contradiction. See, at many times, we also do this. In the mornings when the mind is very, very calm, clear, very meditative, the first 3 hours of the morning, you spend in a deep level awareness and think of these Aham Brahmasmi, Mahavakyas, think of the real nature of the Atman. It's a very refreshing, purifying experience. Gradually, as the day proceeds, you will get involved in a whole lot of things. Your work begins, you have to do a whole lot of things, you have to talk many things. So then the mind has started functioning in different modes. Then you can definitely bring in the spirit of surrender. So Bhakti Yoga can begin. You bring in Karma Yoga. Whatever you do, make it as an offering to the divine. And from time to time, go into meditation, go into a period of silence. Every day, if you can practice it even 4 times, the meditative mood will prevail throughout the day. And towards the evening, again, the spirit of devotion and surrender naturally descends into a calm, meditative mind. So then again, invoke your bhakti. Invoke the knowledge which you practiced in the morning. And that is how, again, before you go to sleep, deeply into these ideas, feeling the truth of all this. So that this way you can, you see, in just one day you have practiced all 4 yogas. So you can do it. It's not that the Bhakti Yogi and the Jnana Yogi are 2 different compartments altogether and they never meet. Even the Bhagavad Gita, doesn't it talk of all the yogas? But be a yogi, that is what they tell you. Being a yogi, which means the yukta state of mind, the state where you are connected deeply with the divine. That is to be generated by whatever means, whether through your thought, through your emotion, through your work, through bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, karma yoga, through whatever means, the state of yoga is to be generated. And Shri Krishna tells that is above all austerity, above merely even thinking. You may know that famous verse of the Bhagavad Gita, tapasvibhyodhiko yogi, jnanibhyopi matodhikaha, karmibhyaschadhiko yogi, tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. Know the yogi to be greater than the tapasvi, greater than the mere thinker, because here jnani means thinker, and greater than the worker, because he has attained the state of yoga. So this state of mind is to be generated by whatever means. That is the goal. And there is also a pathless path. You know, people may not take a definite technique and yet land up there by just emptying mind. There are people who are qualified to do that also. So anyhow, somehow, by any means, go there. That's the essential thing. And then the question continues. So how do we deal with this seeming contradiction? Because Swamiji also is saying that the master taught him that the yogas are to be combined. So you are right, it is a seeming contradiction. It is not a contradiction. You can apply all the 4 yogas together on your journey to self-knowledge, whatever your goal is. For some people, the journey is not towards self-knowledge. It is towards devotion, supreme devotion to the Lord. And they use self-knowledge as a means to that. More knowledge of oneself to develop devotion. So whatever your spiritual goal is, please remember you can combine all the 4 paths. And don't make the mistake of becoming exclusive. Because remember, Sri Ramakrishna's bhav was all inclusive. So we are following these scriptures also, we are studying them in the light of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. So make sure that you get something of that bhav into your own system. Follow all the 4 yogas. Then, when I read first, this is another question. When I read for the first time Jnana Yoga, I started, okay, I tried to purify my mind. Okay, all that is there. Then, if only stopping mind, why Swamiji is so different from so many others? And why the fire that I see in you is not in everyone else? Okay. So the thing is, you are emptying mind in order to generate higher awareness. You are not emptying mind for its own sake. Isn't it? So the magnetism of a personality like Swamiji is because he has attained the higher state of yoga. He revels in that. That is the power of this personality. See, don't talk of us. If this question is to me, that why don't I see the power, the fire that I see in you in others? Let's not talk about ourselves. We are all very ordinary people. But keep before you an ideal like Vivekananda. What is it that gave him that power and that fire? It is because he was soaked, he dwelt in the truth of being, of Brahman. It is this that gives this power to any personality. You have known yourself to the very depths of your being. Then you will be superbly confident, isn't it? In the life of Buddha, this confidence comes out so well. Somebody once asked him that, well, all that you say is not in the scriptures. Then Buddha said, well, then you put it there. And then the person said, but what you say actually contradicts the scriptures. And then Buddha said, that means the scriptures need to be amended. Look at the confidence of the man. This is what realization gives you. The power of a personality comes from self-knowledge. And this is a power which never goes, because you have been strengthened, you have been empowered from within. So this is what you should observe in personalities like Swami Vivekananda. How do you know which path is best for spiritual practice? When somebody is doing Raj Yoga, can he switch over to Bhakti or Karma Yoga? If somebody is initiated, is this change possible? See, that path is best for spiritual practice, which is easy and obvious to you. That is your path. And once you are initiated, you have already been put into a path. So follow that. You can switch to any yoga as per your temperament, as per your mood. But don't make it a constant fluctuation. There must be sustained effort on this path in anything that you are doing. So if you are meditative, carry on that meditation for a long time. If you are feeling, if you have the feel of devotional service for the Lord, carry it on for some time. And it's not like changing gears according to ground topology. According to your moods, you're changing gears. It should not be like that. Develop a steadiness of mind by which every yoga will work for you. Otherwise, today, many times our restless ways can make a mess of this thing also. So you must stick to the path that has been shown to you and use all 4 yogas. That you can do, definitely. But make sure that you stick to your spiritual practice in every yoga. Please do it and see. Somebody wanted to know in your last lecture which page is the gospel incident from. Okay, he's asking about the incident with the sadhu. In the last class, I gave you an incident where Sri Ramakrishna is talking with the sadhu, and with the sadhu who tells him that Brahman is Om, and then Sri Ramakrishna asks him, what is Om? What is Brahman? And he says it is both, it is Om, and then Sri Ramakrishna actually goes into Samadhi when he says that Om is both the indicator and the indicated, which means it is Brahman itself. Sri Ramakrishna actually goes to Samadhi at that point. So this was described, and he is asking me what page from the Gospel. So from Swami Nikhilananda's translation of the Gospel, which is again New York Center publication, and Mylapore Mutt, Chennai Mutt has published it. From that book, it is on page 372. You can refer to the incident there. It's very enlightening actually. Every page of the Gospel, it's just, you must read it after your meditation and you will see its effect on you. I told you, reading it for a few years will change your whole mind. It's a spiritual practice in itself, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. You don't have to adopt very difficult techniques. Just read the Gospel after your meditation hours every day. Read at least 1 or 2 pages, dwell on it, and it will transform your mind in a few years' time. It will make you a yogi naturally. That is the power of the Gospel. So I think time is also up, and these were the questions for today. We will resume again next week. I will end the class with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayah, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhaga Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.